right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter, but does it serve me? That whole, then it starts that beta wheel. So
Yeah.
yeah, the beauty of it is belief is individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so your look at how you look at your life, what you believe, and if it's serving you in your goals and aspirations and your faith and what's going to happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you can also, change your belief to still support you, but not restrict you. Like
Right.
with Dave's example, if the world's flat, you believe the world's flat. Well, I want to become an astronaut to prove that the world's flat.
Mm-hmm.
Or something. You can kind of change the meaning
Mm-hmm.
To whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and I think embedded in that also, though, is you're talking about being able to change your beliefs, and part of it is just, what if the actual facts contradict your beliefs? That's going to hold you back because now you're conflicted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it gets potentially dangerous, I think, is when someone has, and I don't know if you would, it's beyond a belief, blind faith, we could perhaps say, where they are so committed to something that even when all of the evidence is to the contrary and it's holding back, they'll stick with it. That's getting to an almost delusional state, right? But I mean, that's going a little bit further down the rabbit hole than you probably need to.
No, and honestly, the exercise behind belief in this system is calling you out on your bluff. Like, what's the truth? Is the truth that there's items supporting this? Like, where is the facts?
Right.
Where are the facts? And it gets you to extract kind of the facts behind it and see, is this really true?
Yes. Yeah, and that's hugely important.
Goals, it's it's a catch-22 at some point, because a belief is inherently true in itself. Right?
In the fact that you believe it?
Because it goes unchallenged, you believe it to be a truth. So it takes it to kind of reflect on yourself and on your belief and look at it from a different angle and say, is it really true?
Right.
Not everybody can do that. Not everybody.
It's true.
Yeah. So it is true. Done. End of discussion, moving on. But
it's like Dave, did you call that client? And I called him. I called everybody. I totally believe that I called the client. I canceled the appointment. I had to do something else. And they're like, no, man, he's saying you didn't call him. He showed up. Now all of a sudden, now it's a big deal.
Right.
I said, well, I totally believe that I called him. Like, I knew I did.
Right.
I went back into my records, my phone records, couldn't find his phone number. So the belief was shattered, because it's like, I believed I did, but guess what? I really didn't. So the evidence showed I didn't call him. Went back to my boss, said, look, you know what? I really thought I did, but I don't see his phone number in my call log, so I probably did not. Something like that. Simple. It's a simple example.
Yeah,
but it's,
absolutely. Well, our minds play tricks on us all the time, and we have hindsight bias and a lot of other these patterns that make us think that they make us a lot more certain of ourselves than we probably should be. The problems that studies have shown with memory are just innumerable. But that's the difference between a lie and a mistake, because you really believed that you had, and you owned up to it. So I don't remember if there's anything in there, or if you even want to get into this kind of territory, but the idea of it's okay if you realize that your belief needs to be updated. Like going back to like, it's progress to realize you were wrong, because you must have learned something, or you wouldn't even be able to acknowledge you'd been wrong previously. Going back to your analogy of the flat earth astronaut, once the astronaut, let's say for some, in this alternate universe, is actually allowed to do it, and they go up, they'll look down at the earth and they could say, well, it's circular, but that doesn't mean it's a sphere. I'm looking at one It's just flat, but I'm just seeing the circle. Or a demon put this hallucination in my head. Or there are some people who will not, no matter what kind of evidence, admit that they're wrong, because it wounds their self-identity to do so. It's part of, it's too big of a blow to their pride. Maybe it threatens their faith in the institutions and the people that they care about.
They will fabricate whatever it takes.
Oh my God,
to fill that void, to maintain that belief.
Mm-hmm.
And taking, this tool is meant to get people to call themselves out and to get that, really fact check.
Mm-hmm.
And there might even be a part in here where it's like, what, if you can't seem to get through that belief, that's the time where you need to get a third party.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I'm gonna kick myself. We should have this recorded. This would be a great podcast that we're doing right now.
I actually just started recording.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So you're thinking the same thing I was. That's wonderful. I do have a question for you, Sean, because I was asked the same question to Adam, because in terms of like marketing,
mm-hmm.
And the kind of the entrepreneurial type of look at this and how we're going to be helping people, the one fundamental question that we have is, what problem are we trying to solve for someone? After reading this book, what would you say, if you have a suggestion or a thought? What problem are we trying to solve?
I'd say the first thing that springs to mind, and it's a really widespread, damn near universal issue, is somewhere, I guess it's kind of where lack of drive and lack of direction meet. And I think that those two things are interrelated. I think that there's a learned helplessness that's very common around the world. The difference between people, what they would like to have happen and what they actually believe can happen. In intelligence analysis, when we do a threat analysis, the easiest way to break it down on the most fundamental level is intent and capabilities. If you look at a certain group that could be dangerous to a certain target, what do they want to do? What do they want to do harm, and how badly do they want to do it? And then are they able to do it, right? Well, if you break intent down a little bit more, I really like this. It's a somewhat newer version of doing a threat analysis model. It's desire plus expectation. So the reason I like this is because I think it's very insightful about two different things that shouldn't be conflated. There's desire to do something, but the actual expectation that it's possible is equally important. You can want all kinds of stuff, but if you've gotten it into your head that it's beyond your control, that there's nothing you can do about it, you're not going to act on it, right? Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So I think that those are two related issues that are going on in probably millions or billions of people around the world. Either they don't have much desire for anything because they've gotten into a rut, or for whatever reason. There are people out there who probably are actually content, and the reason that they're not, hitting it hard to go towards something is that maybe a few of them are actually truly content, and there's nothing driving them because they're just blissed out, and that's amazing, but it's probably not very common. Some of them don't probably have the desire for anything in particular, and there could be a crap load of reasons why that's the case. If they just haven't found something that really pushes them, or they just aren't thinking about their why in a particular way, and they might not even have any dreams right now. And then there are those who might have the dreams, but they don't have the expectation that they can actually do anything about it. Or in a lot of cases, and I've heard people allude to this, maybe the dreams are kind of hidden in there somewhere in their minds, but their expectation is so low that they don't even entertain those thoughts any longer. They have a hard time even putting themselves in the mental hypothetical of, what if I could do anything I wanted? Most people are so kind of beaten down by their circumstances, or they've allowed themselves to be, or however you want to put it, that they have a hard time even dreaming.
Yeah.
Right? They don't even know. If you said, magic wand, rub a lamp or whatever, you wish, however you want to put it, you win the lottery, whatever, what would you do? They can go as far as winning the lottery in a lot of cases because that's something that's tangible. They know it happens, so they can have the desire for it, but they don't expect it's going to happen for them because of obvious statistical reasons. But what would you do with it? Then they'll throw out maybe some cliches, get a car or whatever. But what if we take the lottery out of the equation and you just want that car? Are there other ways to get it? Why do you want it? Do you see what I mean? I think that it's kind of at least a two-part problem. The interrelation between desire and expectation, and that most people don't think about those things in a way, or they don't process those concepts in a way that benefit them. Sorry, that was a rather circuitous path, but it's a very good but complex question. So that's the best I can do at the moment.
And this book actually was born out of, I would say, learned helplessness and frustration from experiencing that exact thing that you're talking about. For Dave and I both, like, we went through times where it was like, what the heck? It's just not worth it. Everything's going the opposite direction, and I got to do something about it. But nothing's working, and there's no real, we keep coming back to this idea of a system. There's no process to turn it around, and it was very the impetus for that was it was very piecemeal. Like, you can go and figure out how to set goals. You could read a book on how to find your why. Read a book on how to discover your dreams, right? And how to be at your peak and mindset. There wasn't something that kind of brought it all together.
Right.
Like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, do this. Here's how they build on each other. And whether you take that to a small dream, achieving something small or achieving something big, it's still the same process.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So coming back to what you were saying, it's like the lack of drive, and drive kind of comes from having a dream that inspires you, having why that inspires you. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to have the drive.
Absolutely. And the idea that it's something, the idea that it's something you can actually do.
Yeah.
Right.
I put it. That comes back to the belief piece.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I wasn't born smart. I don't have the money. All those excuses that people come up with that are very legitimate, but there might be a different strategy on how to get there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, we pieced it together for that exact reason. But what we're trying to do is, like, there's so many things that it solves and that it attacks. It's hard to get it down into a one sentence description of, like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
What Dave's getting at is, like, how can we get this into a very concise message as to here's what it does. Like, here's the problem.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one, and it definitely deserves, for many reasons, both conceptual and very practical. That's something that we'll need to work on. Even if it's just for marketing purposes, being able to put very concisely what the benefit is, or what the mission is, if you will, of the project. Yeah, definitely. So I think we've all got an idea of what it does, and then it's a matter of just tweaking the language, right?
Yeah. I think also, each individual person may have a different type of problem.
Oh, definitely.
And so, if you kind of take an evaluation of, like, your own life and say, okay, I guess the other question is, what deficits do I have? What barriers do I have that's stopping me? Those type of things. Maybe those questions could help define that. But why would I need? How could this system help me? Is the other question, and that's where the system comes in. Well, it can help you by, defining a lot of different things and give you a system and strategies. It gives you the mindset to do it. All that stuff we talked about.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm sorry.
It's hard to get it really concise. But if you think of it from the perspective of a coach, right? If you're an athlete and you go to a coach and you want to get better, well, what are they going to do when you first get there? They're going to take an inventory of where you're at.
They're going to assess.
They're going to say, okay, here's where you're at here. Here's where you're at here. And based on that, they're going to create an exercise or a set of, exercises or, a plan for you.
Training regimen. Yeah.
You up. And they're going to start you slow. They want to, get you to strain any muscles or whatever it is, start building you up, give you a plan, but it's a multifaceted plan.
Yes.
Right? They're going to put you on a diet. They're going to put you on, a certain maybe sleep regimen. They're going to put a certain weight regimen, different muscle groups. It's the same kind of idea where we're trying to get people into like getting first the assessment, seeing where you're at, discovering like what Dave was saying, what defines you, what is your, what deficits do you currently have, any blind, helping you to see the blind spots.
Right.
When you're like, oh, well, I could definitely improve that without much of a change. And then providing a system that they can reference. It's like, okay, here's how I can overcome this.
Yeah. And building off of their strengths too. I think that some people, the old approach in certain types of coaching and business training and stuff was so focused on the deficits that people never got past this is all the stuff that's wrong with me. So obviously I suck. So why am I trying? It's people's egos are pretty fragile. So I think a big part of it is you acknowledging those deficits, but also helping them to build off of their strengths. And one of the things also, as you were talking about coaching, and that I would think is a good idea to put into your description of what you're doing, and you don't have to use this word for it, but I really like the word demystify. Most people are overwhelmed. We're in this, quote, information age, but a lot of it's not even information. It's just data. It's just crap. There's all this stuff out there and people are getting inundated. There's too many options in some ways for the average person. They feel completely overwhelmed. To demystify the process, to simplify it, that's something that people crave. They really crave a simple, manageable solution. And I think that concept, which is obviously there, it really needs to be pushed forward when you're trying to explain to people what this is about.
Yeah. And that's what simplifying what process?
Yeah, and that's the part that we all know what we're talking about, but the best way to explain it, that's something we're going to have to work on. Right? Would you call it a process of transformation? Would you call it a process of, you can use some of the more bland but very, appropriate words like everybody wants, quote, success, personal growth. There's a ton of ways to put it. So it's a matter of picking the words or phrases that are going to communicate the best with people and be the most accurate, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a good point because there is so much information. It is all data, and to talk about a problem, the problem would be just being overwhelmed.
Yes.
And then you get the paralysis by analysis idea, and where do you start, especially for like an entrepreneur?
Oh God,
There's so much information. So, where do I start? What do I do? And you kind of you lose. You don't even have a focus. And I think what this does is kind of centers you and says, what are you really dreaming about? Like what do you want?
Right.
And then going from there, it gives you a way of moving forward where actually is a tangible way, an action orientation to be able to kind of move forward and kind of collect everything, organize it, and then execute it.
Yeah, it's about making it manageable, right? Because I think, and I deal with this problem all the time, I think it's pretty common, is just having these kind of nebulous desires and dreams and wanting to do this and that, but not even the idea of not even knowing. We're talking about learned helplessness, which I think is at the root of the core problem, that you're trying to fix, or help people to fix for themselves. A lot of people won't even begin the journey if they, I don't know, I'm envisioning something where you're standing here and you've got 12 different paths extending from wherever they're standing at the moment, and hypothetically, maybe they'll all eventually lead to where they want, but some of them are going to be more winding or whatever. I don't know. That sounds like bullshit, but you see what I mean? I think a lot of people are so overwhelmed that they don't even start. As soon as a goal or a dream pops into their head, immediately all of the different options and all of the different obstacles, there's an avalanche of this stuff, and they just say, screw it. My life's not so bad. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And maybe I'll figure it out next year.
It's a combination between the number of choices that people have,
yeah,
or even the lack of choice, and
in some cases, yeah,
where the unknown, where is that going to go? I mean,
yes,
it goes off into this dark abyss, and you don't even know where that road is really going to take you. Whether but if you commit to it, you're going to change what you're doing right now in life, and what right now in life is providing, and it's comfortable enough, and you don't know if it's going to be worse.
People will, the average person will always choose what's familiar over what's healthy or what's good for them. This is why people stay in abusive relationships. It's why they stay. The fear of the unknown is greater than the fear of certain misery for the average person.
Oh.
And I don't know why, if that's an evolutionary thing. I mean, there are probably evolutionary psychologists that can trace this back to kind of our lizard brain, almost sort of, primitive approach, that at least it seems more manageable when we know what to expect. But when you can get people to fear stagnation more than they fear the unknown, I think that's the big turning point.
Mm. Yeah, one thing I believe we talked about it in the book, and I needed to reference it, but Dave has a version of this, but Tim Ferriss also talks about fear setting, and actually going into what really is the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Like if we go down that road, like really is it that bad? And play out all the scenarios to a point where you're like, what, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Worst case, I declare bankruptcy, but what, I'm employable. I can go get a job.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I have other income that, it's fine. I'll be fine. Right.
Yeah.
But people don't think like that. They don't think rationally. They start getting emotional.
They catastrophize things. And sometimes most people, by the time they get to a certain age, have already overcome some stuff that they wouldn't have thought that they could have done. Looking back on past things that you overcame, where maybe at the time you thought it was the end of the world, and then you realized, all things considered, that it wasn't really that bad. I think building off of previous successes can be great. I think we talked about that little exercise I like to do with friends when I'm kind of talking them through certain things, the 5 years back, 5 years forward, or 10 years back, 10 years forward. It's a very simple thing, but describe your life 10 years ago. Now describe it now. Now, whether it's better or worse, how much has it changed? In most cases, it's better over 5-10 years. Most people's lives, God willing, tend to get a little better. But if you focus on just how different is it, and then they'll realize, oh my God, I was living in this place and I was doing that job and whatever. And then you say, well, how different do you think your life is going to be 10 years from now? And now that you're thinking about things in the right way, and now that you learned this and that, and now that you're doing this and this, there's probably a good chance that it not only will be very different, but it'll be different for the better. Because back then you didn't know all this stuff, right?
Awesome.
It's a simple, but it's a really effective exercise.
Yeah, I love it.
Put stuff into perspective.
So I took some notes as far as some of the keywords that we were talking about.
Cool.
And yeah, I think once we get some of the content like we're talking about finalized, the that one sentence description is probably going to come out.
And the good news is I don't think you necessarily need it until the end. The one sentence description is incredibly important, but the good news is that you can do everything else now, and it doesn't have to wait for that. The one sentence description goes on the back of the book, or you can add it, into the intro materials once you're ready for it. It's going to go into the, in somewhere in the SEO and, the various types of marketing and stuff like that. So that's the good news, is that this is kind of the tip of the tip of the tip of the pyramid of the process of writing this. Did you guys understand what I meant? And it might have sounded a little bit dickish, but I want to look through again, and I don't think you did this. One of my peeves, and this is just me being persnickety, but I don't think you guys really, I don't think yours was bad in this case, but I'm reading another book right now that just makes all these references to this book in the beginning. I don't know if people who don't write a lot would be annoyed by this, or if they'd be annoyed at all. But when I hear people in an intro keep saying, and once again, I'm not saying you guys did this, but they're like, this book, this, and they keep using that phrase, this book, it makes me think like these are amateurs and they just can't fucking believe they're actually writing a book for the first time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, we couldn't believe it either.
Yeah, right. But don't which is cool, but don't let them know that. You know what I mean? This book I'm reading, that you can tell that the guy's really good at what he does, and he's had a lot of success. But and you can pick up that he's very young when he's writing it, and it's just like the most egregious. This is something that bugged me before, and now it just happens that I'm reading one where it's just every other. But you can even just mix it up and say this project, this concept. So part of it is just avoiding redundancy, and I think you guys only make the reference a couple of times. But I actually, just for the hell of it, did a Control F to find any this book references. Like how many do we have in this one? It started something that I've started doing to catch myself from doing it too. But that's what I was going on about with that. It's just one of those things. After writing a lot and reading a lot, it seems like, and maybe that's not the worst thing in the world for people to make it very obvious that this is a new project for you. But I think that we can look through, and there might be a couple of places where just for good measure, we might switch any this book references to something mix it up a little bit.
We plan to expand this out to like the concept of chicken soup for the soul.
Sure.
And to have experts maybe write a chapter.
That's great.
Or two in the book. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's a very accomplished salesman. And I was asking him, I was like, look, I'd like you to, write for the Mindcoach system. We were trying to figure out, like, number one, like, what he would write about, and kind of maybe kind of things that like would help people in the sales field, but also where it would go in the book. And I was
for this first book.
Dave, let me answer that real quick. I mean, what I was imagining is, let's say we find someone in, it's sales. Okay, let's just say sales, right? It's an expert in sales. What are some of the dreams of salespeople? What are some of the whys behind some salespeople? I see a small section behind each level.
Yeah.
What are the challenges? What are the beliefs that in this industry as salespeople, what do they need to overcome?
Well, I think that's perfect, because then you're still keeping. So, I think the focus, like, while the product that you're working on right now is a book, it's really not about the book. It's about the system. You see what I mean? So I would put the emphasis on this system does this system does that. The book is just a vehicle for the system. And you don't want to paint yourself into that corner. So in this case, I think it's even a bigger deal, actually, now that I think about it, to not make this book references, make this system references. So you're not painting yourself into that corner. On a related note with what Adam's talking about, if you're bringing in different, so you just made the chicken soup reference, chicken soup for the this soul, the that soul, Mindcoach for sales, Mindcoach for teachers, Mindcoach for whatever. And then it's scalable and replicable, because in every case you've got kind of a formula where you go through the system, but you just show how it would apply to this profession or this interest. It's going to make it a hell of a lot easier for you to write the stuff, for one thing, or to create new material. But it also is the consistency that if you're saying that you're going to demystify and simplify stuff, and then it's all over the place, obviously that's no good for anyone. But if it's a bit of a plug and play where you walk them through it, well, this is how the Mindcoach, you've got your general Mindcoach for whoever, and then you can do, this is Mindcoach for information marketers or whatever, and you could make an endless number of these. But I think the emphasis should be, in terms of the word choice, the system, not the book.
Yeah, we could very easily create a template around that.
Exactly. Yes.
It would fill out.
Yeah.
Like, give us some success stories of people who achieve peak potential, in this industry. And
yeah.
Here's maybe some of their stories. Here's what they dreamed about. Here's the, why behind it. Walking them through, and I think we could lay that out so they're not having to do a lot of thinking.
Yes.
So answer these particular questions. This level of the triangle, this pyramid, this section, this section, and that goes in, and
you make it as easy as possible. So you got the general Mindcoach system, which is universal and simplifies things. And then it's kind of like, and if that's not simple enough for you, here's something that will walk you through exactly how this applies to you. You want to make it as accessible as possible. I think that makes a lot of sense. And having the template is also just going to mean, on a very logistical level, that you can crank these things out easier. As a general observation, I might not be the typical reader of this kind of thing, but I know that there are people, it's a big thing now to do these funnels and squeeze pages and stuff where they start out with a personal story. I hate that. I don't know if that's just me. The personal stories are important, but I think I tend to believe, definitely for me, and I can't be the only one, that if you start out with just talking about when I was 14, nobody gives a shit, It doesn't mean that it doesn't come in, seriously, because everybody's got a story and everybody thinks that they're more interesting than anybody else tends to think that they are. But if you lead with even something fairly brief about, if you hook them in terms of what you can do for them, and then you tell your story as clearly an illustration, then that's the way to go. So you were talking about, just for future reference, when you have people writing for you, or when you develop these templates, and I'll be happy to help you guys with this if you want, but I would have it set up in a way that they don't jump down that rabbit hole of just carrying on. It's like, it's not your personal memoir, goddammit. Give us the good stuff. Don't bury the lead. Tell us up front, you probably want to pose a question to them of like, what's the most important thing you learned about X? And have them come right, flat out with it. Maybe something, where they don't give away the farm immediately, but they make it very clear why the person needs to read what comes after that. Kind of your thesis, if you will. And then you explain it through an illustration that could be autobiographical.
I think one of the most interesting components when we start doing that model and going into the chicken soup model is when we get to the strategy section.
Yes.
Goals are, going to be pretty, maybe a little industry specific, just based on how many people you got to reach out to, based on how many people can close, etc. But when it gets to the strategy section, all of those are going to be totally different.
Yes.
is going to be very cool and create a lot of best practices in industries. I'm like, okay, how can you shortcut, your goals and your dreams to get to where you want to go faster? Right?
Well, that's going to be the most interesting part. It's going to be the most labor intensive because it is going to be industry specific, but that's where you're also earning your keep and justifying why did we need a different book for these guys versus these guys. That's when the really good stuff, I think, is going to take place, and probably also where you're going to need to pull in help, from industries if it's not something that you guys have already mastered. Like for real estate, I'm sure you could write that in your sleep, which is probably a good one to do, by the way, if you're starting to think now about spin-offs, right? Cool. So I think at this point, the ball is in Yins's guys' court to go through and make whatever adjustments you want to the content. And when you're happy with that, please shoot it over, and then I can do a deep dive into the writing, the editing type stuff.
Okay. And so with the editing will come the stylistic writing that you can kind of cinch up for us as well.
Yeah, but I would still like to do this, and I know these days, everybody does things in shared documents in OneDrive and stuff like that, and I don't think this is just me being some kind of antiquarian. I don't have a problem with that in and of itself, but when I'm working on somebody else's stuff, I really don't like to go in and start mucking about with your version of something, because ultimately it's yours and it's your call what you do with it, which is why I've asked that you send stuff over in a Word document, but you're keeping your original. Does that make sense? Because logistically speaking, if I change something and you hate it and we don't have a copy of what it was before, we're kind of screwed. So whenever you guys, I would recommend you share between you or do whatever it is that works for you that you've sorted out. But the one that you send over to me, please do it in a Word doc. And that way I can go in, I'll highlight what my changes are so that you can look at them and make a comparison, because I'm not arrogant enough to assume that my changes are always what you want or what's best. They're merely suggestions. Does that make sense? Why I'm being a pain in the ass in that particular way?
That makes sense.
That's great.
Okay, cool. All right. I will talk to you guys later. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I look forward to seeing what you come up with next, but obviously take your time. This is not the kind of thing to rush through. This is the foundation of what could be a frigging empire if you play your cards right.
We'll have it to you by 6 p.m. today.
Perfect. That should be more than enough time.
We don't mess around, Sean. We work fast.
You don't. Here. You don't. I was impressed. I was not only impressed how fast you got that version back to me after we talked the last time, but this sounds, I don't know, whatever, but it's great working with people. It's not that I expect every suggestion to be acted upon, but it's nice to see that when your input is at least taken seriously and considered, because the stuff that we talked about in the previous conversation that we agreed would be good to do this or that, you guys didn't just half-ass it. I mean, you nailed exactly what we were talking about, which seems to indicate that just the communication is really solid on this project. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool, man. Thanks.
Talk to you soon. Let me know if you need anything in the meantime, all right?
Appreciate your time.
Okay, you betcha. Cheers.
Yeah.